everyone, welcome to my channel. So today we're reviewing Dexter New Blood, and this will be part 1, so we're reviewing all the way up to episode 6 because I was originally going to do just an entire video of the whole season, but I realized that was just gonna be like 3 hours. Future me here, so I know this video is like ages long, so I put in time cards down below. You can either click on the bar or it will be down in the description bar. So if you're just here for theories and you don't want the whole summary of the show, just go ahead and skip to that part. I hope you guys enjoy the video. So just a few need to knows from the last show. Dexter is a serial killer who kills murderers, specifically serial killers. So it's 10 years ahead in time. He now goes by the name Jim Lindsay in this series. Another thing is Dexter's mother was murdered in front of him when he was a child. His wife was killed by a serial killer in front of his son Harrison, and it was a serial killer that Dexter did kill, but it was not in time before the serial killer killed Rita. So very sad. Dexter obviously has a son named Harrison that he abandoned in the last series. He left with his girlfriend at the time named Hannah, and that Dexter was taught the code by his adopted father Harry, which is only kill murderers after finding conclusive evidence that they are in fact murderers, and don't get caught. So those are the things that Dexter's code was. But anyways, let's just get into episode 1. First episode, we're starting with summaries. So the show is set in upstate New York in a town called Iron Lake. He's shown running through the woods, chasing after this white buck. This will come in later, so just remember the white buck. He's running after it. He stops and points his weapon at the white buck with his hand on the trigger, but then he chooses not to shoot it. He just kind of stares at it. So it seems like he doesn't have intentions to kill it. It's more for admiring, I guess, but he is still pointing his weapon at it. So he's living in a cabin in the woods. He has some goats and chickens. He has a little farm. He's chopping wood and stuff. It's kind of odd that he has animals when you think about it, because in the original series, Dexter does not like animals, or it's more that animals don't like him. It's they sense he's a sociopath and so they don't like him. Not necessarily a plot hole. I think it's just interesting, just interesting. So the first few minutes of the show are silent until broken up with Deb's voice. Deb was Dexter's sister that died in the last series. She was shot and was basically dead, and Dexter didn't want her to die that way, so he threw her off a boat into the ocean to kind of make sure she wasn't suffering anymore, So now she has taken on the place of his conscience, which Harry once did in the previous series. It's almost like the devil versus the angel on the shoulder. So Deb is definitely a figment of his imagination in this. She does some very Deb things, things that, he thinks Deb would say, but there are some intense hallucinations as well with her. But basically Deb is Dexter's conscience in this series. So then next, Dexter is shown sharpening knives. You're oh, is he still killing? Is he not? We don't know. Then he's driving with them in his passenger seat and is very quickly pulled over after. It turns out that the police officer that pulls him over is his girlfriend, and it's kind of a little role play thing that they do. I also really I wanted to say that his girlfriend is in the police department, because it kind of shows he still gets a similar in that he did with forensics. So Dexter works at a place called Fred's. It's a fish and game shop. So as Dexter's working at Fred's, a man walks in that's in his late 20s named Matt Caldwell. So it seems that he's kind of the rich kid in town. He grew up there. His dad had a lot of money. He's working on Wall Street, doing stocks or whatever. Apparently he does pretty well. He's I need a gun. I want the biggest one you have. Points to the one in this, thing on the wall with lights on it that's $9,000. And Dexter's all right, well, you have to have a background check to get this gun. And he's come on, just give me the gun, man. Just he's trying to sweet talk Dexter, and Dexter is just not having it. He's no, have to follow the law, that's the rules. So he buys the knife, kind of like waves it in Dexter's face, like, you know, he's clearly not careful and is kind of like a spoiled jerk is the best insult I can come up with without swearing. Then as he's leaving, he like grabs his friend, puts him in a chokehold with the knife up to his neck. You're like, ooh, okay, so this guy is clearly not careful. Like, it's clear, you know, Dexter probably doesn't like him very much, you know, but doesn't seem like he's a murderer. Then Dexter walks into the police office, presumably to see Angela, his girlfriend, and right away they're already saying that Matt Caldwell has a red flag. They're like, can you believe he got a red flag on his background check? There's this girl named Esther that I love her character. She's just, you know, cute, like blue eyeshadow type of lady, like with nails, like I just love it. She's like the town's like gossiper. So she's saying that she thinks the red flag is because of a boat accident that happened, but one of the other police officers, Logan, is like, no, like that was an accident. He wasn't even driving the boat. So kind of like some things coming up. Dexter's kind of like, interesting, all right. Then he goes line dancing at the local bar with Angela. We meet a few more characters. There's a local girl at the bar named Tess. It turns out that Matt Caldwell is at the bar buying everyone drinks. He's like, all right, I'll just pay for my own, like, don't put it on his tab. Cuts to a scene where a semi rolls up and drops someone off. We don't know who the person is, but, you know, kind of shows like a mystery guy, and he seems to be watching Dexter throughout this episode. Back at the bar, there's a runaway girl trying to, you know, get together her coins to buy a burger. And Angela ends up paying for her food. She says that there's a shelter down the street. She helps her out. It shows that she has like a soft spot for missing girls. She had a friend named Iris that went missing when she was younger, her childhood best friend, and she was never found. That's kind of why she became a cop. So we kind of get to know a little bit of Angela's story from that. Then Angela sees on her doorbell cam, she has a daughter named Audrey that is having a party at her house, and she's like, I gotta go. So Dexter leaves as well, separately, but as he leaves, someone's watching him again. After that, Dexter is shown again chasing after the white buck, and he, you know, he's like, beautiful. He's pointing the gun at it. It almost seems more like he's like using the gun to kind of like see what the buck is rather than like to shoot it. Like it's more of like an admiring thing. And then something cracks in the distance and a mystery person is shown, you know, running away. So Dexter goes back to the shop and his boss says he needs to deliver the gun to Matt. The background check passed. He has to go do it. Dexter doesn't want to, but he has to go anyway. So there's a bunch of people at the party. It seems, you know, some illegal activities going on, but, you know, Dexter's not really a snitch about that kind of stuff, you know. So he goes in and finds Matt's friend Bill that was at the shop, or, you know, more like Bill finds Dexter. They start talking, and apparently the boat accident wasn't an accident, and Matt was the one driving. Says that Bill was the one that covered for Matt. He got like a Rolex and some money for it. But it turns out that the situation was two boats were playing chicken. And the other boat even turned away, but Matt just drove right into it. Just like unashamed, was just driving into it. And it turns out Matt didn't like the guy that he hit. So this makes Matt a ding 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 murderer, which follows Dexter's code. So Dexter delivers the gun to Matt finally, and Matt's swinging the gun around like he did kind of with the knife. He points it at Dexter, and Dexter has this fantasy in his head of like hitting him with the gun and like, you know, knocking Matt out. He doesn't actually do it. He just turns around and leaves. You can tell Dexter is like, he's got this guy on his radar. He's like trying to, you know, stay strong, stay good with like, you know, that he's had 10 years without a kill, trying very hard not to be tempted to hurt this guy. After like some stuff, Dexter goes home and he finds someone in his house. So he's like getting ready. He has an axe in hand. He's like, who is this? Who's in my house? And it turns out, turns around, and the person says, it's me, Harrison, your son. Dexter's like, Harrison? He like, you know, his face lights up, but then Deb appears in front of him, the voice in his head, his sister. And she's like, you can't have a relationship with him. Everybody close to you dies. And she starts listing them. Dokes, Rita, Harrison's mom, me. And she proceeds to pull a bullet out of her stomach. And Dexter's like, I'm sorry, I'm not him. I don't know who that is because he's going by Jim Lindsay. Harrison's like looking skeptical. He's like, if you don't want me, just say it. Dexter's like, no, like that's not me. There's a shelter down the street. The bus stop's not far. I'll give you some cash for the bus stop. Here's the next part. So Dexter sees the white buck again, but instead of aiming or shooting at it at all, he approaches it while heartfelt music is playing and he's saying, please, 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 like approaching it with his hands out. So he's walking closer, kneels down. They're just kind of staring at each other, having a moment, and then boom, the white buck is shot. It's shot by guess who? Matt Caldwell. So Matt comes up, he's like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. Thank goodness I got it before it got you. And Dexter's like visibly upset. He's shaking, he's mad. And then he takes the butt of his gun, like in his fantasy, and then just smacks Matt on the head. And then right after he does that, Dexter's voice in his head comes back. Because the whole part of the first episode, it was pretty much silent. And I was like, when is his inner voice gonna come back? Like, what's going on? And so you realize it's, you know, the dark part of him is his inner voice. So I just thought that was interesting. And I was glad that the inner voice came back. It just seemed so, Dexter, it just seemed like something was missing until it came back. So I was really happy that they brought it in, you know. He stages a crime scene for Matt, sets it all up, plastic on the walls, everything, you know, the original setup. Matt's blaming it on his childhood for the reason why he killed all the people on his boat, that his parents weren't there, and Dexter's like, you're blaming this on bad parenting? Dexter does the little wavy knife thing back like Matt did to him. I just thought that was funny. The whole scene just felt very nostalgic because I was such a fan of the series before, so to see like this again, I shouldn't be happy that Dexter's killing again, but it just reminded me so much of the original series. He kills him, then he goes to the bus stop, sees Harrison there, and decides that he wants Harrison to stay. Some things I feel like we need to talk about, like the main thing that we need to talk about with this episode before we go to episode 2 is the meaning of the white buck. I just feel like the scene was so poetic and well done because the symbolism of the white buck is purity, which I felt like related to Dexter's 10 years without a kill. He reaches out to it like he's surrendering to the peace in a way, almost like it's what he truly wants. And then it's taken away from him by the person he ends up murdering. So in a way, like that peace and purity is killed twice, you know, metaphorically by Dexter. So I thought that was very interesting. I also felt it also symbolized the things and the people that he loves will die if he doesn't take the bad out of the world, giving a deeper meaning to the code than just a set of rules that were given to him. So yeah, let's move on to episode 2. Episode 2 opens up with Dexter and Harrison chatting. Dexter makes him food. Harrison is pretty closed off, understandably so. His dad abandoned him. Like, that's the main thing. That's the main reason, you know, why Harrison is upset. His dad abandoned him. It's understandable. Dexter says in his head that, you know, there are so many things he wishes he could say, but he can't, because he believes he's a monster. It also comes up that Hannah died of pancreatic cancer, who was Harrison's stepmother, who is the woman Dexter left Harrison with in the last episode of the last series. And Harrison has been in foster care for the past 3 years. The hallucinations with Deb start to get more intense, so Deb breaks a window with a bullet, like just by tapping on it, and it breaks. And I feel like this is interesting because she wasn't really like this, you know, as like a person in her character. Like, she wasn't this crazy, if that makes sense. So it kind of shows that like it is, certain things are how he believes Deb would react, but a lot of them are exaggerated, where it's almost like, you know, the conflict he's going about inside. Next clip, we see a random stray girl that's staying in a cabin or hotel. She has like a nice robe on. She's getting champagne, strawberries, like living the life. But just wait. Then it cuts to someone watching her on a laptop, and it's a man with white hair and blue eyes. That's really all we're given. Then next thing is Dexter discovers that he left some bloody footprints out there from this, you know, after killing Matt. And as he's doing that, the police roll up to Dexter's house, he's like, oh shoot, you know. And they're like, we heard Matt Caldwell was in these, like, last seen in these woods last night. Would it be okay if we set up camp here? And Dexter's like, yeah, sure. In that moment, as they're there, or in that scene, Angela meets Harrison. Harrison comes out of the house. She's like, oh, hello, because, you know, Dexter, or Jim Lindsay, has never talked about Harrison before. It seems like she'd be really upset. She was upset for a minute. They talked about it, and, you know, she actually is okay with it because she's like, I know you don't like to talk about your past much. That's okay. I'm glad that we have something in common now. Then it cuts to the scene back at the cabin with the stray girl. This girl, I also forgot to mention, was the same girl from the bar that was trying to get money together for a hamburger. She gets sick. She says it's from too much champagne. It could be from the chocolate covered strawberries. Could have been poisoned or something, you know? So the next scene cuts to Dexter is in like a 4x4, like kind of four-wheeler type thing. I don't know vehicles, guys. But he is trying to cover his tracks where the blood was with a 4x4, just kind of like, you know, whipping around. Harrison's in there too. They're kind of chatting. Then they discover the white box scene. He's like, you know, why don't you go and tell them about this crime scene? I'm gonna stay here, you know, make sure it's not disturbed. While he goes and kind of like disturbs the scene. I think there was like a rock involved where Matt hit his head, so Dexter picks that out of the ground, takes it out. You know, he's kind of trying to make the scene not as, you know, or make it look like Dexter was not involved. It still looks like a crime scene, but he's not involved. Angela goes to some rich man's place. I can't remember his name. I'll put it here. Asking for a helicopter for the search. This leaves some mystery of who is watching the girl, but it also makes you wonder if it's him because he has the white hair and blue eyes, which is, you know, all we saw because the guy had a mask on. So she's asking for helicopters for the search party. So then Dexter, you know, he's there, and then it was on Seneca land, which is a Native American tribe there, and so they're all around, and, you know, they're like, who would do this? Like, this is a very sacred animal. And Dexter's like, I don't know. And he's like, I think Matt Caldwell could have done it. Which I was kind of shocked when he said that, just like came out and was like, I don't know, do you think Matt Caldwell could have? They're like, yeah, I bet it was him. So he's trying to kind of plant it in their heads, you know, that it was Matt, which it was, you know, but you know, we know what happened. The Seneca people also bring up the irony that all of these people are looking for Matt. Like, there's a whole search party and everything, yet there are so many missing girls from their town and their tribe that have just been written off as runaways, which is super messed up. The next thing is Harrison decides to go out with the search party as well with Angela's daughter Audrey and her friends. They end up not doing the search party. They want to party instead, I guess. So they go into this abandoned cabin. Harrison can pick a lock pretty easily, kind of showing like he might have some sort of a troubled past. And then while they're in there, he, you know, some of them are smoking and things like that. The forbidden lettuce. They're like, do you want some? He's like, no, I'm sober. I've had a past with drugs and I'm not involved with them anymore. So another clue that, you know, he's had a troubled past. Harrison leaves. He's getting some wood for like a fireplace in there. He sees through a window. They're looking through his stuff. So as they're looking through the bag, it shows that Harrison does art. He sees that they're looking through his bag. He kind of like kicks the wall, and so they like rush to put it back. Audrey's like, we shouldn't be doing this, don't look through his stuff. And so as they're sitting on the couch, he also tells them that his mom and stepmom died and that he just plans to be in Iron Lake temporarily. So it sounds like he was just kind of planning on meeting his dad and getting out of there, at least, you know, is what it sounds like. It seems like there's some chemistry between Audrey and Harrison. After that, he reveals that he found the letter that Dexter wrote him, that he was actually alive, that he didn't die, he just abandoned them, and he found this after Hannah died. So Dexter and Harrison have a conversation about making their relationship work. Harrison brings up the dark tendencies mention that Dexter wrote in the letter. He's like, what did you see in me? What dark tendencies did you see? And Dexter says, nothing, you were perfect. So then Kurt Caldwell, Matt's dad, comes in where the search is going on because they're gonna cancel it. They're like, Matt probably just left somewhere, maybe hitchhiked, probably off like, you know, partying somewhere, and his dad's mad. He's like, no, you need to keep searching. Then at the end of the episode, it's revealed that Matt is buried underneath the fire pit of Dexter's house. So kind of an interesting place. I mean, not one where you really think to look. Dexter is smart. We know that, you know, that's not new. Kurt Caldwell, Matt's dad, also kind of fits the look of who the serial killer could be. So is Kurt the serial killer in town? We don't know. Now on to episode 3. It's Harrison's first day of school. Dexter goes into the police station. It turns out that there is footage of Matt shooting the deer, which, you know, stresses Dexter out a little, but they have Dexter come in just to identifying if that was the gun that Dexter sold to Matt. He confirms it's Matt, obviously. Then it cuts to Harrison at school, and he sees that some of Audrey's friends, the boys, are catfishing a student named Ethan, which Ethan is kind of like a nerdier kid. He's quiet. He's texting the girl his drawings while they're, you know, sending naughty pictures back, things like that. And Harrison remarks, that's messed up. The search continues and photos are taken at the crime scene, as well as a blood analyst comes in, which was Dexter's previous job, and pretty much nails exactly what happened, which stresses Dexter out. He's like, oh no. They know. They're gonna know. I need to find a better place for this body. He's stressing out. Next, the principal calls Dexter into the school. Harrison apparently scored really high on a test, and they're like, you know, Tess left the room for a few minutes. We think Harrison might have cheated and looked up the answers on his phone. There's no way someone could have scored this high. Harrison insists he did not cheat. Dexter is kind of skeptical. He's like, did you cheat? You know, he doesn't really have Harrison's back, which offends Harrison. And so they're like, well, why don't you retake the test? And so Harrison does and ends up scoring higher than he did the first time, proving that he did not cheat. He's just really smart, like Dexter also was. Then it cuts to Angela talking to Kurt on the phone, who is Matt's dad. And you know, he's kind of giving her crap. If you were a real cop, this will be happening. She's saying, you know what? Look, I have been doing this search without any funding at all, and like, we've covered all this ground already. Tomorrow we are covering this area, and we'll be all the way out by the caves. You think he'd be all the way out by the caves? She's like, you know, we're not taking any chances. And so after the phone call is done, Kurt goes, he's like, dang it, like he looks upset that they're going, which is interesting, you know? It's like they're looking for your dead son. Wouldn't you want them looking everywhere? Dexter takes Matt's jacket from off his body and drags it all over to create a scent trail for the search dogs the next day. Takes it all the way up to kind of where the freeway is, and I think he leaves a piece of clothing there. Like I think he leaves the jacket there. Then it cuts back to that cabin scene with the girl, the runaway girl, and the person watching her opens the door for her to escape. She runs out into the woods, and as she's running, she looks back, and then the person that is watching her run away with the gun shoots her. So whoever that person is, we don't know yet, shoots her. So it definitely seems to be like a ritual for him. Like after it happens, he kind of like sighs with relief, like he's happy about it. Then a person named Molly is introduced. We know that she's a podcaster like in the next episode, so I'm just gonna say that, but she says she's a citizen activist and wants to help with the search. Also, another thing that happens is whenever Harrison and Dexter are talking, he seems to repeatedly say that he learned to take care of himself to Dexter, like kind of like a dig, which makes sense. It kind of makes me wonder, there are theories, did Harrison actually kill Hannah? You know, has Harrison been alone longer than he lets on? Has it been longer than the 3 years? Like obviously 3 years in a foster, like bouncing around in foster homes is gonna be awful. Has it been longer than that? Is there more to the story than that? It cuts to another scene with the serial killer, and he is like embalming the bodies, and he has like a set of pajamas out for them. He kind of treats them like dolls. It's kind of interesting. It makes you wonder, like, was there, you know, did this person, the serial killer, lose a daughter of some sort and is like trying to keep these like girls' bodies as dolls? Like, it's just kind of interesting. It cuts to Harrison at school. He chooses to sit with Ethan rather than the popular kids that he was hanging out with. I'm calling them the popular kids because it just kind of seems like that's what the group is. They're all wearing like Letterman's jackets and they do sports and stuff. I don't know. Harrison chooses to sit with Ethan and tells Ethan that Zach has been catfishing him. And Ethan's like, why would you tell me this? Why are you being so nice to me? And Harrison says, kids like Zach shouldn't always be top of the food chain. Next, Jim is called into the police office and is questioned. It seems intense, but it turns out, you know, everything's pretty much fine. It doesn't go anywhere. It cuts back to the school, and Ethan sends Zach a photoshopped photo making fun of Zach, you know, with like an animal or something involved. Zach tries to confront Ethan. He's like, hey, what the heck do you think you're doing? And then Harrison comes up to him and like grabs him by the neck and chokes him and threatens, you know, he's like, do not mess with Ethan ever again. And then after that, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I made the wrestling team, so kind of like watch out, is kind of like what he's insinuating, it seems. That's kind of like the first glimpse we get of Harrison seeming like he has a dark side. Like, he helped the kid, you know, that was a very sweet. It seems that he has that same kind of thing with vengeance that is like more like revenge and vengeance towards people that are doing wrong to innocent people, it kind of seems to me. So that's kind of interesting. It's something they have in common. Then Audrey drives Harrison home, and Harrison explains that he moved around a lot and he doesn't really care what people think, and that he wants Ethan to not be afraid of those people anymore. You know, just because he's grown up in the same town his whole life and has been treated this way doesn't mean he should always be treated this way. So then Audrey's car breaks down. The rich guy comes and offers to have her sit in the car, like where it's warm, and she's like, no, I'm good. Wants nothing to do with him. So then Harrison and Ethan FaceTime each other, and Ethan's like, I wish I could have, the way you just, you know, showed Zach who was boss. I've always wished I could have done that. And then Ethan shows Harrison some drawings that he's made, which are very graphic drawings of, you know, hurting Zach. Ethan's drawn himself as the Punisher. Harrison's kind of like, what are you, the Punisher? And Ethan's like, they'd be scared of me if I was, huh? So it seems like Ethan's had a lot of anger towards these people. And Harrison doesn't really seem fazed by this. Like, he's not shocked. He's not like, oh my gosh, wow, these are intense. Like, he doesn't really even say anything. He just kind of looks at them, the drawings, kind of intrigued in a way. Then later, the White Buck's body is moved from the freezer, and there is a ceremony with it being burned, to which Dexter gets the idea to put Matt's body in the horse incinerator. So it's never going to be found. Pretty smart place to put a body. Maybe I shouldn't say stuff like that. Sorry. Dexter's kind of talking in his head about abstaining from killing, that he doesn't want to kill again, like he needs to be good, especially if he wants to have a relationship with Harrison. The next scene is Dexter's driving home in his truck, and then Kurt is seen celebrating, and he tells Dexter that Matt FaceTimed him, he's okay and stuff, literally as Matt's ashes are in the air. And Dexter is like, well, that's obviously not true. Why would he be lying? And he just kind of says that to himself. I think he actually takes Kurt home that night too, like, you know, because he's very drunk. On to episode 4, called H is for Hero. So Dexter tells Angela that he gave Kurt a ride home, tells him, like, he says he FaceTimed Matt, you know. Angela brings Kurt in and asks questions about Matt, obviously, but Kurt's story actually seems to line up with what he says, and Kurt says that he's staying in New York, so she has another police officer, Logan, run the cards. Harrison listens to Molly's podcast. He listens to the episode specifically about the Trinity killer, who is the murderer who killed, or the serial killer who murdered Harrison's mother, Rita. She remarks that the baby was there, how screwed up is that kid now? Which I was like, in any like actual true crime podcast now, like no one would say something like that, you know what I mean? But she was like, is he normal or is he totally screwed up? Like, I don't know, I just thought it was, I was like, oh my god. The way that Rita was killed that is mentioned in the podcast as well is that her leg was slashed. He kind of seems like upset by the podcast. They also posted this podcast on the YouTube Showtime channel, and I did listen to it, so we will talk about that at the end, and I will have time cards for everything. So then Dexter gets a call that there was a complication at school, like people were hurt and Harrison was involved. He goes to the school. Harrison was stabbed in the stomach. It's kind of a shallow wound, so it's not crazy. deep or anything, so he's not super hurt. Harrison claims that Ethan was planning a school shooting and that he wanted Harrison to be a part of it. And when Harrison refused to be a part of it, Ethan stabbed Harrison, and so Harrison, you know, slashed his leg in a similar way that Rita's leg was slashed. Kind of interesting. Dexter is kind of curious about this. He just feels like the story doesn't totally line up, which, you know, Dexter was a blood analyst. So he goes to the crime scene where Harrison said it happened. Dexter analyzes the blood. He discovers that Harrison actually hurt Ethan and stabbed himself. He reenacts the whole scene with Deb in his head because the blood of, you know, the story of the blood according to Harrison's story just does not add up. It actually lines up perfectly with Harrison stabbing Ethan, like slashing his leg as he was walking away, and then Harrison stabbing himself. So the blood doesn't lie, like Dexter says. The blood doesn't lie. So, I mean, the police do discover that Ethan had a kill list. There's definitely truth to his story. Harrison goes to the hospital to try to apologize to the family, see how Ethan's doing. He still hasn't woken up yet. Apparently he lost so much blood that if the paramedics hadn't gotten to him quick enough, he would have died, which kind of shows Harrison might have tried to kill him on purpose. It seems like he was, especially with the blood slash just being right after he listened to that podcast about the Trinity killer. It's just very eerie. Dexter hears that no one believes Ethan, but Dexter, you know, knows the true story. But Ethan claims that Harrison actually stabbed him, but like I said, no one believes him. So Dexter confronts Harrison about it, and he's like, you know, why don't you believe me? You know, he's getting defensive because this is the second time Dexter hasn't believed him on something, whether he's right or not. Kurt and Dexter talk. Kurt like comes to his house. He's like, everyone thinks Harrison is a hero. He's like congratulating Dexter. You know, I wish my son was a hero. Like, people just think of him as a murderer, and now he's just, you know, out partying and stuff. And Dexter's like, oh, he didn't mean to do that in the boat accident. And Kurt starts to get skeptical and was like, he wasn't even driving. Dexter's like, oh yeah, I know that. He's like, how did you know that? Dexter's like, well, my girlfriend's a police officer. Like, that's kind of how I would know. He's like, you know, still kind of looking skeptical. And he's like, you know, he was a teenager when it happened, is what Dexter says. And Kurt's like, no, he wasn't. But, you know, it kind of gets Kurt to be not as skeptical of Dexter. So it kind of gets him off the trail. But Dexter realizes that Kurt was fishing and that, you know, now Kurt might be onto him. It cuts to Molly figuring out that one of the girls on Angela's missing persons list was actually just a runaway, but it turns out the rest of the people on the list she couldn't find anything for. She asks all her internet sleuths to try and find someone, and they were only able to find one. So it kind of shows that, like, these girls are missing. Angela's not crazy. And Molly, you know, offers to partner up. She wants to partner up with Angela, and Angela is like kind of open to it. You know, she's like, well, you know, like, you did all this, you might be helpful. Then Kurt is at a restaurant and there is a runaway girl outside named Chloe with blue hair. I don't know why it matters that she has blue hair, but I just think it's cute. I used to have bright red hair, so I always love when people have bright colored hair. It's just fun. So Kurt sees the girl outside. She's asking for money and stuff, and apparently he had already given her money, and she's like, I was gonna use that for the bus fare, but it's cold and I was hungry. I bought a meal and I bought this coat. And he's like, well, you know, I can't just keep giving you money, but I can give you a job. And she's like, well, I'm not planning on staying here. And he's like, well, like, I can at least give you a place to stay. So she agrees, and that's kind of the end of that scene. So then it cuts to the school has an assembly about the school shooting because it came out that there was a kill list and that a bunch of the students' names were on it. You know, all the kids are like, Harrison, give a speech, you know? They're like, you saved us, you're the hero. And so he gets up and gives a speech, and he talks about how he doesn't blame Ethan for wanting to do it because Ethan was bullied and how, you know, a lot of them weren't kind to Ethan. He also says the quote, maybe we're a little bit hero and a little bit monster. It's all about which side wins out in the end. So that's, you know, kind of interesting. As the assembly's going on, there's like a scene of Dexter going through Harrison's things. going through his things because he believes that there is a knife missing from the crime scene that Harrison would have used, like a knife that Harrison brought himself. He finds it hidden in a flashlight, and that is when Dexter realizes he's like, he has my dark passenger, and he's like holding it to his lips like this, like he seems kind of happy about it. Maybe it's because he feels like he has something in common with Harrison now, you know, it's not exactly totally clear, but he seems happy about it. But I think like the question this poses is, it's like, if, you know, Harrison does have the dark passenger, was it because he was born in blood like Dexter was, you know, the born in blood? Or, you know, was it just passed down? Like, was it that it would be unavoidable? I mean, the other thing is also that hasn't been talked about is that Hannah was also a serial killer. That is what her and Dexter had in common. Like, she had stopped killing and kind of like helped him to feel like he didn't need to kill anymore, but she was also a serial killer. I feel like that shouldn't just be, you know, totally ignored. So, you know, who knows? So it opens up with Deb talking to Dexter. You know, Dexter is talking to Deb in his head, I guess. And she says, do you think he remembers? Talking about the, you know, being born in blood. And Dexter's like, he can't. Then Dexter talks about how lonely it is having the dark passenger. It comes off as like he wants to be there for Harrison, but it can also be taken as he wants to be understood by someone. Like he wants Harrison to be able to understand him and be able to talk to him about those things, you know? So next thing is Kurt takes Chloe to the secluded cabin in the woods, which is the room that was used for the last victim. So we now know that Kurt is in fact the serial killer in town. She's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. How can you be this nice? And he says to her, just make sure you pay it forward. One thing I wanted to note, she kind of looks like a young Demi Lovato to me, like Camp Rock Demi Lovato is what it reminds me of. She's so cute. Then the scene cuts to the police station, and it turns out that Matt is in fact in New York. At least the cards have been run there, you know. So to verify that Matt's there, Angela and Molly, the podcaster, decide to go to New York and see if it's true, see if Matt's really there. Then Dexter confronts Harrison about the knife and says that Ethan's side of the story was very different from what Harrison said it was, and he's like, you're really gonna believe that psycho over me? He gets defensive once again. Dexter remarks, I think you're going through something you don't understand and I want to help you. And Harrison says, why would I trust you? You're the one living a lie, Jim, because Jim's not his real name. So, you know, it's a good point. I mean, Jim hasn't really opened up to Harrison. Harrison seems to be skeptical. He wants to be believed by Dexter, and it seems like he just wants Dexter to accept him for who he is, which I think is what, you know, Dexter wants from Harrison as well and wants from other people in his life. So I think that's kind of interesting. Then Harrison gets invited to a party called the Kill List Party, and they are having it kind of like for him because they're like, you saved our lives, dude. Then Dexter is at a bar. He's talking to the bartender and, you know, talking about his problems with Harrison. Like, Dexter clearly wants to connect with Harrison, but he's not really sure how. I mean, he can't really be honest with anyone. All the people he's been honest with are pretty much dead. And she recommends taking him to a therapist, and she brings up the name of one. Then what happens in the bar, Kurt comes in to the bar, and Tess says he does this every few months. He comes in and of course he's playing that same song, which the song is called Runaway, or Runaways, I found out. And he plays it on a jukebox every few months. And he, you know, beckons her over to come and dance with him. They dance together. He's kind of like losing himself in the song, seems very happy. So it kind of seems like this is probably part of his ritual for his victims. Like, he's very happy when there's, you know, someone there for him to kill. It's kind of eerie. Back at the party, the way the camera shoots him, it's like just him. He's wearing one of those camera things, so it's like very much showing like how he's feeling in the moment. He may be doing drugs to kind of like escape how he feels. The whole town thinks he's a hero, yet his dad doesn't believe him. Some girls come up to him and they want him to carve an H into her foot. I was gonna leave this out, but I actually think it's important to leave in. The girls ask him to carve an H into their foot, like, you're the hero, I want to remember this forever. And so he starts to, and the girls freak out. They're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Oh my gosh, ow, that hurt. Like, she's freaking out, and he's kind of like, he sees the blood and he just kind of like, it's hard to know if it's a response and like he's like scared, or if he's intrigued by it, or if he's scared that he likes it. It's kind of interesting because you can't hear what's going on in Harrison's head like you can with Dexter, so we can only really speculate how he's actually feeling. So it turns out he later overdoses, but right before he overdoses, he tells Audrey about the problems with his dad, but he says to her, Jim isn't even his real name, and then passes out. So then Audrey calls 911. Coach Logan revives him and finds out, you know, who dealt him the drugs, where they're from, because, you know, they need to shut that down. So Dexter shows up at the hospital. It turns out the drug was way stronger than they thought it was and what it was sold to be as. If, you know, the paramedics had waited any longer, he could have died. So Dexter's, you know, he's mad. He's mad about this. And I think it's interesting because it kind of shows Dexter is usually very calm, collected, but when it comes to his son, it shows a much more human side of him. So it kind of makes you wonder, is he actually a sociopath? Is he a psychopath? Which we'll talk about later. Dexter talks to the coach and tries to figure out who is the person that dealt him the drugs, or like who is the drug dealer. It comes up that his name is Miles. So Harrison and him are released from the hospital, and that is when Dexter decides that Harrison should go into therapy. Next, Chloe in the room discovers that there is a camera in there. She looks up at it, and right beneath the camera, written on the ceiling, says, "You're already dead," and she kind of like gasps. Goes to Angela and Molly at the hotel. They're at the front desk and they're, you know, asking about Matt, trying to get the information. The hotel guy's like, "No, I can't give that to you." She's like, "I have to see if he was actually here. This is part of an investigation. It's really important." And so eventually the hotel guy's like, "Yes, I can get you that information after." Then Dexter goes to the local vet in town and makes up a story that his goat needs ketamine and that it's hurt. That's like, sure, grab whatever you want. He gets ketamine, he gets syringes, and he gets plastic. So you know he's planning to kill. That's like the Dexter recipe for a kill. Then he drives to a bar in broad daylight to find the drug dealer. I find this really interesting because it shows that he's willing to do pretty much anything to protect Harrison, and it kind of clouds his judgment and strategy more than, you know, before, because broad daylight gives many risks. Usually it was always at night when he would do a kill, or, you know, he would go, it would at least be secluded if it was in daytime. So it's a lot more risky. So he goes into the bar and he lures Miles out, saying that he wants to buy some drugs from him. When Miles has his back turned, he sticks a syringe in, but as the syringe is stuck in, the police are pulling up, so he can't release the ketamine, obviously. So he pulls it out and pretends to beat him up and is like, or not pretends, he actually does. He's like, "Stay away from my son," as his cover up, which I thought was very smart. It shows that he's still quick on his feet. It was a good cover, you know? So he says, "Stay away from my son." The cops make him come back to the station and he's like, "Come on, really?" You know, putting on the show, and they're like, "Yeah." So, you know, he goes back to the station. So back at the hotel, Angela goes to a hotel conference that's going on because, you know, they're in town, why not? And guess who is the speaker at the conference? Angel Batista from the Miami Homicide Department. So super interesting because, you know, he obviously knows Dexter. You know, when this happens, you're like, oh God, is she gonna find out who he is? What's happening? Some people may feel like this was far-fetched for Angel to be there. I didn't feel like it was that far-fetched because when you think about it, Angel's probably been in the department for years now. I'm sure he's solved tons and tons of murders and crimes. So I liked that they brought him in. Like, I didn't think it was that far-fetched. So back at the station, Dexter listens in on the interrogation between Logan and Miles, and Logan's trying to figure out who the actual drug dealer is, you know? He's like, tell me who he is. If you don't tell me, then I have all these murders that I can put you on for. So he gives him the name. His name is Jasper, and has the reception lady, Esther, look it up. And so Dexter comes out as he's hugging her, peeks over her shoulder to see the address of Jasper so he can go kill him. Back at the cabin, Chloe tries to seduce Kurt from the camera, because my camera dies. Cool. So at the cabin, the girl decides to try and seduce Kurt from the camera, and he's mad about it. He's like, stop it, stop, you're ruining, this is not how it's supposed to go, you're ruining my plan. He shuts the laptop and she sees that the camera has turned off, so she's like, shoot, I messed this up. But then you see that underneath the pillow, she reaches underneath and it is like she broke a mirror or something, so she is like a shard, so some sort of weapon to protect her. She seems smart. I liked that, you know, it shows she's willing to try and do anything to, you know, save her own life. She's not just hoping he lets her out. She's trying to take her life into her own hands. Back at the hotel, the Bay Harbor Butcher is mentioned by Batista, and Molly makes the remark to Angela, can you imagine being next to a serial killer for years and have no idea? It's kind of funny because it's a little tongue-in-cheek because Angela's doing that with Dexter, obviously, you know. He's a serial killer and she has no idea. So then Dexter goes around Jasper's house. He finds the address, and then he's going around and he finds proof that it's actually him in a room where all the blue pills are. Then it goes back to the cabin. So Kurt lets the door open and he says, you're free to go, Chloe. But she decides to stay in the room, and she says to the camera, make me. He comes down, she cuts his cheek with the thing, he drags her out. He's like, run out towards the forest. He's like, go, just go already. And she decides to run towards him. Even when she knows she's gonna die, she runs towards him with the gun, and he shoots her in the head. And he's upset. He's like, this is not the way it's supposed to happen. You ruined everything. You know, he's like saying that to himself. It almost looks like he might be like crying. He seems very upset, and then he shoots her in the chest again. We'll talk about more of that later. So then after the conference, Angela sits with Batista. Angela and Angel, that's funny. She's talking to him about the missing girls in the town, and that she just has a gut feeling that they're missing. And he's like, it reminds me of a case. We had a detective named Deb that had a gut feeling about the Trinity killer case. She was like, oh, what happened to her? And he was like, she died. Her brother also died, really sad, left behind a really cute little kid. What was his name again? Can't remember. Oh yeah, Harrison. So Angela, she kind of raises her eyebrows, but like, you know, it's not enough to really make her look into it. It's just kind of odd, you know, because she doesn't know anything about Dexter in that regard. Angela and Molly go down to the hotel, and they discover Matt Caldwell was never at the hotel according to the footage. It was someone else, maybe someone Kurt paid to make it look like Matt was there. Then it cuts to Dexter having Jasper on his kill table with pictures of all the victims. He's like, you killed all these people. Jasper's like, I never killed anyone. And he's like, these are all people that took the drug that you gave them. He's like, I'm sorry, you know, whatever, the whole spiel. As he's about to kill Jasper, he hears police sirens outside, so the police are finally there. At this scene, it made me so nervous. I was like, Dexter's gonna get caught. There's like no way he's gonna escape this. You get super nervous. So then it cuts to another scene. So Kurt sees Harrison seems to be going out of town, like he's leaving town, he's done. He offers to buy him a meal. They go into the diner, and as Kurt is talking to Harrison, he makes the comment, when you hate someone, you should go and do something nice for them, because Harrison's talking about how he's angry with Dexter and all of that. You know, if you want some more independence, you can get a job here. Harrison's like, why are you being so nice to me? Like, what do you want in return? And Kurt says, pay it forward, which he said to Chloe before. It seems like he says it to his victim, so it makes you wonder, is Harrison going to be a victim of Kurt's? He's not, you know, a woman or is Kurt going to take Harrison on as his son? Then Angela talks to Audrey and is talking to her about, you know, Harrison's overdose, how Audrey's doing, and Audrey mentions that Harrison said something really weird, and that was that Jim is not Harrison's father's real name. The red flags go off in Angela's head. So she researches, you know, what happened, because it's like, that's just too close. Harrison being the son, saying that Jim is not his real name. So she goes, and the episode ends with her printing off Dexter Morgan's obituary. So yeah, let's talk about the episode. Let's talk about Chloe. I really liked Chloe. I liked her character. I felt like she was smart. She put up a fight up until the end, even when she died. You know, I think it's cool that she did and that they had a character like that. I mean, obviously we don't want her to die, but you know, it was interesting, and you know, now we know that Kurt is a serial killer as well. I also liked that they didn't drag out showing that Kurt is the serial killer in town. I feel like the show's been really good so far because it feels like pretty much all of the scenes and the characters in the show feel purposeful and that they're supposed to be there. It just feels very well done. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that Michael C. Hall, Dexter Morgan, his band is playing at the end. I didn't know he had a band, so that was kind of interesting. But now let's move on to episode 6. We're back to it, and my camera died, unfortunately, so I just went ahead and applied lashes and my lipstick because I had to charge it, and that thing takes forever to charge. So let's move on with the rest of the videos. Okay, so on to episode 6, called Too Many Tuna Sandwiches. So Harrison does chores around the place, you know, doing something nice for Dexter like Kurt talked to him about. Deb says that she's proud of Dexter because he's not doing what Harry did. You know, Harry trained Dexter to be a serial killer. So she's just saying how she's proud of him and all that. You know, seems like Deb isn't as extreme in his head. Dexter sees sticking out of Harrison's backpack that he has an application for Kurt's truck stop diner. Dexter doesn't want him working there because he doesn't really like Kurt, you know? And Harrison tells Dexter that he talked to Kurt instead of going to therapy the night before, and Dexter is upset that Kurt is talking to his son. Then it cuts to Kurt making a mask for Chloe to mask where the bullet was. It doesn't look right. He says, what a waste, and he, you know, destroys it. Up next, Angela pulls Jim over, and she, you know, he thinks it's gonna be one of their things again, but she pulls out his obituary and she says, I want the one for Dexter Morgan. She's like, you can come to the station now. He goes to the station, and you know, Angela's upset that he's been lying. She's like, every time I've called you Jim, it's been a lie. And Dexter tells her that he was running from death. He tells her about Rita being murdered, then about Deb, and says that Angela is stronger than he was for going back to homicide after Angela's husband and Iris. Dexter just says it was too hard for him to go back. He said that homicide made him feel hopeless and that he couldn't be Dexter Morgan anymore and he was cursed. Which technically this isn't a lie. Like, obviously there was, you know, the fact that he's a serial killer. He was saying like he's happy, this is all that he's ever needed, but the thing that was very interesting to me is that Angela was just not having it. She wasn't like, I understand, you know, she was still just not taking any of it. She was like, everything is a lie. No wonder Harrison has been having such a hard time. He's keeping up this lie for you. Dexter's like, yeah, well, you know, I have him in therapy, and Angela's like, you're the one that needs therapy. And he's like, are we breaking up? She's like, relationships are built on trust. She seems pretty done. It cuts to Kurt at the diner again. He sees another girl. She is asking for money from somebody, and he's like, here, I own the place. Here's some cash, you know. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. Seems like Kurt's trying to get his next victim because she's young. She fits pretty much all the criteria. But then her boyfriend comes up and is like, I found us a ride all the way to like Louisiana or something like that. And she's like, thank you so much. And so Kurt like just seems like visibly upset. He's like, oh, just seems mad. And then Harrison comes up to him and he says, hey, you know, he gives him the application. Kurt notices that Jim didn't sign it, and so he signs it for Harrison. He's like, that's fine, forges the signature, and so now Harrison can work there. Then Dexter is at home. He thinks that it might be Molly that is onto him and that told Angela his identity. So, because, you know, she doesn't tell him about the conference. She doesn't really tell him anything about how she knows. So he's listening to the podcast about the Bay Harbor Butcher and that Molly thinks the Bay Harbor Butcher is still out there. And so Dexter is kind of paranoid. He thinks she might be coming for him. The next thing is Dexter and Harrison go to therapy. Harrison, he opens up about how he feels abandoned, how he was in foster homes and he used to just sit and cry at night pretending his dad was alive, hoping he was alive. And then he found the letter from Hannah saying that not only was he alive, but he had completely abandoned them. He opens up about it, how he felt abandoned, how hard it was, and Dexter replies with, "It was a difficult time. I wish things were different." Which, I mean, Harrison's upset with. And this bugged me too. Like, I wish that they would just kind of like talk. You know what I mean? Like, obviously Dexter can't tell him the truth about everything. But it made me sad that Harrison's opening up. He wants to have a relationship with his dad, clearly. He wants to connect with him. He wants to understand what happened, and Dexter's just not really giving it much. The therapist says, you know, we may be through with the past, but the past isn't through with us. He asks about Dexter's childhood. Dexter's like, it was a typical childhood, that he was adopted and stuff. The therapist remarks that they both have abandonment issues, and that, you know, that kind of trauma can even be passed down and be called inherited trauma. Dexter talks a little bit more. He says that his marriage with Rita fell apart, which really pissed Harrison off. Obviously, Harrison says, actually, my mom was murdered by a serial killer. And Dexter responds, but you don't remember anything about it, do you? Like, and, you know, Harrison's like, no, just the stuff I've heard online. Therapist asks, you know, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that time? And Dexter, he's kind of like holding his chest. You can tell, like, he's probably feeling something and just not saying it. But he's like, you know, I think I'm past it now. It's in the past. I don't really think about it. And then Harrison opens up and he says that he feels abandoned here, especially with Dexter not saying anything. The next scene is Angela in the police department talking to Logan, and she thinks that Kurt is hiding something near the Clark Caves because she believes Matt is dead and that Kurt is hiding something, because the last time that they talked on the phone, or the next place they were going to go, was the Clark Caves when she was talking to Kurt, and all of a sudden Kurt calls it off. So she wants to check there. Harrison won't meet with Dexter. They're having dinner because he, you know, he's like, why would I talk to you now if you're not going to talk about, if you're not even going to talk to me in therapy about real things? So then Dexter looks again at Molly's podcast. Then he grabs a drink with Logan at the local bar, you know, trying to see if he can get some information about Molly. He says, you know, how do you think I can patch things up with Angela? It kind of brings up, you know, Molly, like, you guys seem great together. And he's like, well, actually, you know, it didn't turn out well, like, we're not together. He says that Angela and Molly seem to have been meeting up in secret, and Dexter in his head is like, oh, I'm doomed. That must be how Angela found out, is from Molly. The next scene is Harrison sneaks into Audrey's room. So they talk about therapy, and he says that he thinks about hurting people like he did with Ethan. Audrey's like, well, that was different, that's an accident. And Harrison's like, it wasn't the first time. He brings up that, you know, someone tried to touch him inappropriately at a bus stop and, you know, he hurt them. He doesn't say how, he doesn't say how badly. Could he have killed them? We don't know. Audrey's like, you know, if someone did that to me, I would have hurt him too. Audrey opens up and says how, you know, she was abandoned by her birth mom, how Angela and her dad were married, and then he died, and that she just felt angry. And she says how she feels like, you know, she doesn't belong anywhere, that she doesn't have any groups that she really belongs to, and that Harrison and her have that in common. They kiss, but while they're kissing, I thought this was interesting. It cuts to Harrison has that knife in his back pocket, which I thought was very interesting. It quickly cuts to the next morning, and Harrison, you know, is caught in Audrey's bed by Angela, but I thought that was interesting. He carries it with him everywhere. It made me wonder if, you know, he was planning on hurting Audrey. I mean, I would really hope not. Angela brings Harrison back to Dexter. She's like, you need to talk to him about this. This is unacceptable. Dexter has no idea how to talk to him about it. And Harrison remarks, like, did you even know I was gone? Dexter's like, I don't look over your bed. Like, I didn't know where you were. Dexter goes to the bar and sees that Kurt and Molly are having a conversation. So he walks up, plugs in his phone nearby so he can record the conversation. Kurt says says the truth is that his son, you know, was drunk and he's staying at his secret lodge in the woods. And then he invites Molly to the cabin on the condition that she doesn't tell anyone where she is. Dexter follows them and sees that Kurt is taking Molly into the cabin. And that is when he realizes Kurt is a serial killer. You know, it's remote. The way he's telling Molly, no one should know where we are. Kurt's like knocking on the door, pretending, you know, oh, he must have some headphones on, you know, whatever. But Dexter comes down and Molly's like, you know, he says that Matt's in there, but Kurt's not opening the door. Dexter's like, oh, Matt, I'd love to say hi. So he just goes in, he just opens the door. And it's very clear what that is, that room. Dexter sees that the door locks from the outside and there's no knob on the door on the inside. He sees the camera. He goes into the bathroom and he's like, what is it with serial killers in bathtubs? Like because you know, there's that jacuzzi or whatever. Kurt's like, oh, looks like he must have just taken off. And Dexter's like, looks like it. And he offers to take Molly home. But before doing that, he asks Kurt, oh, would you like me to shut the door? Like kind of as a wink, like, but I just thought it was funny. Maybe Kurt didn't notice anything and he's like, oh, no. And he tells them not to tell anybody about the Matt situation. Then after they leave, Kurt punches the wall. It looks like he's upset. He's trying to get another victim after, you know, what happened with Chloe. Chloe ruined all his plans, so it's almost like he's trying to make up for that. So then Dexter drives Molly back. She says that she thought she might be a victim in her own podcast when she was in there, and Dexter in his head is like, you have no idea. And she asks Dexter not to tell Angela about it because Angela doesn't want Molly snooping on this stuff. He's like, yeah, secret's safe with me. He's happy about this situation because now, you know, Molly looks at Dexter like he's the good guy. He saved her. Doesn't seem like she's suspicious, so he's not as like paranoid about it. Angela is looking in the caves and finds Iris's body. She recognizes the bracelet on the body and is like, this is Iris. So then Dexter realizes it's Harrison's wrestling match. So he sits next to the bartender teacher. Each time Harrison is kind of not doing well in the match and the guy gets the best of him, Dexter's kind of getting worked up. He wants to go on the floor. He sees that Kurt is down there. You know, he's like, why does Kurt get to be up there, you know, down there, but not me? He's sitting next to Tess. And Tess is like, well, you know, Kurt used to be a wrestling coach. He kind of gets to go down there based on that. Harrison's up against like this like wrestling champion that's doing really well against him. They've gone through 2 rounds and he's already gotten the best of him. Coach Logan's like, it's okay. You know, just, you know, how are you feeling? And he's like, I'm pissed. And then Kurt's like, channel that anger and unleash it on your opponent. Harrison goes out there and he does well against the wrestling champion. He has him in a hold. It seems like he's winning, but then Harrison breaks his arm, just snaps it. Like, oh, I hate that sound. I like had to fast forward, but breaks the arm. Everyone freaks out. Dexter's like, ooh, well, the dark side is coming out again. Alrighty. Kurt, after that, goes up to Harrison and hugs him. He's like, I'm so proud of you. You did so well. You did so good. After he breaks the kid's arm, you're like, this is strange. This is very strange with Kurt. That's not okay. That's not okay. And Harrison was clearly trying to break the arm. So Dexter comes down there and he, you know, pushes Kurt and he's like, get off my son. He's mad, you know, which I think it was a good thing. It shows Harrison that Dexter cares. And as they're walking out, some high schooler threatens, you know, Harrison to watch out, which I thought was funny. You're like, that was, you know, your wrestling team's champion and he just broke his arm. You really want to mess with him? I don't know, that's just my thoughts. I wouldn't say that to someone, you know what I mean? But I also didn't do sports. So they're walking out into the hall. Harrison's like, what's your problem with Kurt? Dexter's like, I don't like him. And then Harrison's like, well, he's a good guy. You know, he doesn't think I'm a psycho. And Dexter was like, if he really is looking out for your best interests, what did Kurt say to you before you walked out? He's like, I don't know. He told me to do well. And then Dexter's like, he told you to hurt him, didn't he? Harrison just kind of seems a little shocked. Dexter's phone's ringing throughout this, so he answers it. It's Angela. She says to him, I Don't want Jim, I need Dexter Morgan. Very interesting. So let's talk about the preview for the 7th episode, which is the next episode. It involves Dexter using his forensic skills with Angela. There's a comment Deb makes that, oh my gosh, what's in my hair? There's a comment that Deb makes that Harrison is moving more towards Kurt. Kurt and Dexter have a conversation. Kurt says there was a time he thought they would be friends. Dexter makes the remark in his head, except you kill innocent women and I kill guys like you. So it also looks like Angela and Dexter are going into Kurt's undercover cabin. So it makes me wonder if they're going to catch Kurt and Dexter doesn't kill him. He may have to refrain from this kill because he has already killed Matt. Not that Matt's body will be found, you know, it seems like he's alive somewhere. You know, maybe Kurt gets caught in this next one. So now let's talk about, you know, something interesting. So in the show, especially in the first series, it's talked about how Dexter is a sociopath. I personally don't think he's a sociopath. And the reason why is this, honestly, this screenshot I found. I'm gonna pull it up right here from YouTube on a video, and it was about like Dexter. I think it was like an analysis video. And they said, really enjoyed your take on Dexter. I'm a behavior analyst, so I look at it from a very different point of view than the psychoanalytical Freud-Jung philosophy. I have thought for years that Dexter is mischaracterized as a psychopath. He is not a psychopath at all. Instead, I believe that Dexter suffers from an extremely severe case of obsessive compulsive disorder, wherein his fixation is on the act of killing. To be a psychopath, Dexter would need to be very lacking in his sense of morality and conscience. This isn't the case, however. Dexter's conscience is just different from ours. What a person views as right and wrong is heavily influenced by the culture they grow up in. Dexter, however, was taught from the time he was a child not that killing was wrong, but rather that he would have to kill and there was nothing he could do about it. The code Harry taught Dexter is his conscience. Were Dexter truly a psychopath, he would not experience nearly the degree of guilt that he does in situations that require him to violate the code. Example, the #1 rule of the code is don't get caught. But even when Dexter is caught by Dokes, Dexter couldn't bring himself to kill him. A psychopath would have easily reasoned that killing Dokes would honor the first rule and done it without question. Obviously, it's a TV show and not a real person, but if it were, I would consider Harry's constant training of Dexter to have been the true cause for what he became. I'm not a doctor, this person claims to be, and they sound pretty smart, so I agree with what they said, especially because one of the first indicators of someone being a sociopath or a psychopath is a lack of empathy, which there are many times that Dexter has shown in this show that he has empathy, especially with Harrison. A sociopath does not have empathy, and I think it's a common misconception about serial killers and or murderers is that people think they're all sociopaths, which a lot of them are, but not all of them. In fact, most murders are crimes of passion, which is scarier when you think about it because it could be someone sitting right next to you. Then the theories I want to talk about. So will they have a second series? They've said that it could be continued, although the show creator Clyde Phillips shared with a source that the ending for New Blood will be stunning, shocking, surprising, and unexpected. He even commented that the ending of this new season will blow up the internet. I really hope it's something surprising. I don't like when I can guess endings. Like, I don't want it to be so surprising that no one could have guessed it, like Pretty Little Liars. My camera has died so many times while filming this that I'm just gonna have to film the rest of this part on my phone, so I apologize, but this is what it is. There are quite a few theories on this. So one is that Dexter kills Harrison because Harrison might actually be a serial killer. Harrison would be a part of the code, and so he feels like he needs to. Another is that Dexter discovers Harrison has the dark passenger and he's killing people not with the code, and so he feels so guilty about it and not being a part of Harrison's life that he kills himself. I just don't think that's how it's gonna end, and I don't think that's shocking. I don't know. It would be a disappointing ending to me. The other one is that Harrison kills Dexter, which would be very poetic when you think about it, because the one thing Dexter creates ends up killing him, which I feel like that would be pretty shocking. I mean, we're talking about the theory, so maybe not as shocking, but it would be a shocking ending. I think I might disagree with both of these. I don't know if it ends in death. I think it could end with Dexter getting caught, but the reason I definitely don't think that Dexter kills Harrison. I think it's possible that if it's either one, Harrison is the one that lives, because the show is called Dexter New Blood. Harrison being the new blood. I just don't know if people would like the ending, and basically the whole reason they brought back this show is because everyone hated the ending of the last show. I didn't think it was that bad of an ending, but you know, people just didn't like it. So like I said, I really hope it's something I can't guess, because I just like shows like that. As long as it's not something just like so far-fetched and out there like the Pretty Little Liars ending. That was just awful. I think that is definitely the worst ending of shows out there. Like, whenever someone has like an evil twin in the end, you're like, are you kidding me? Like, that we've never seen except for one scene. It's just stupid. Can you tell I hate that ending? Yeah. So some other theories are that Harrison ends up killing. I think that this seems pretty likely because he has shown that he is the dark side, especially with Ethan and, you know, talking to Audrey, how he always feels like he wants to hurt people. So it's possible that Harrison kills. One personal theory that I have is that Dexter actually ends up killing in front of Harrison, and I think that he kills Kurt. And so it's possible that, you know, when that happens, you know, maybe, you know, that's the moment where Harrison's choosing between Dexter or Kurt, because Kurt's kind of been like a father figure to him. Or it's that the kill has already happened, and so Harrison is like forced to choose between turning Dexter in, or, you know, maybe they become closer as a part of that. But, you know, who really knows? I don't really know. Like, it's also possible that a lot of people have theorized that Harrison winds up being the next Dexter and that Dexter, like, trains him. But they've also said, like, I've heard that it could be continued, but, I mean, it's called a limited series for a reason, so that tells me that it's going to have a good ending. And, you know, like I said, they pretty much brought the show back in the first place because people didn't like the original's ending. All right, so now we're going to talk about things that bug me. So things that bug me is, this isn't necessarily a critique of the show. It bugs me that Dexter and Harrison won't have a conversation and that Dexter won't give him a partial truth. This could be because he doesn't want to lie to Harrison. There's so much he wants to say and he just doesn't want to lie about like why he left or his past. They like kind of talked about it in like the first 2 episodes, but you know, I wish they would talk more. They kind of leave it a mystery. Like, obviously we know what happened with Dexter, but why not give any explanations to him at all? It's also not totally clear what his intentions are with Harrison, with being a dad, and it's possible, you know, he hasn't been a dad for 10 years. Like, the last time he was a dad was to Aster and Cody, who were Rita's kids. He's not really sure what to do. He's never raised a teenager, we know that for sure. But yeah, like, it seems that Dexter wants to protect him. He doesn't want to mess him up, but he also doesn't spend much time with him. It bugs me that Aster and Cody aren't mentioned at all. Like, I would have thought that Harrison would have been put with their family, especially after Hannah died. Like, they said they sent him back to Miami. Maybe, you know, maybe he killed Aster and Cody. We don't know. Like, maybe something bad happened with that. Or maybe they're just not going to bring it up at all. Could just be kind of like a plot hole or something. But yeah, the things that, you know, I really love about the show is that it feels like every character is supposed to be there. Everything feels very purposeful. There are multiple stories going on at once, so you're not bored. Like, I'm so guilty of bringing out my phone during shows because I just get bored. Like, you know, my ADD can't handle just watching a show for that long. But this is one where I will not pull out my phone. Like, I watch it from the beginning to the very end, no phone out. Yeah, I've absolutely loved the show. Pretty much anytime the episodes are about to be over, I get sad. I'm like, no, I need the next episode to be here. Like, I'm just so passionate about the show and I love it so, so, so much. And I hope you guys do too. Also, I wanted to point out, you know, I liked the contrast of this show from Miami. The colors in the show were more subdued, while Miami was like bright and vibrant, very, you know, much more busy. You know, there were like 3 murders a week in Miami. I was listening to the like they have done some podcasts about it, so it's been interesting. I do like that there are still familiar things that Dexter does. I feel like the show just keeps its same integrity from the last with certain familiarities, but shows, hey, things are different and they've changed. I also loved that Harrison looks like a great mix of Rita and Dexter. I think it's a great casting job. People are so mad that he doesn't have blonde hair like he did when he was younger, but I know so many people with light hair when they were young that darkened as they got older. I think they did a great job of finding someone that looked very much like both of them. So the last thing to cover, this will be pretty quick, is the Marry Effing Kill podcast. So they have this on the Showtime YouTube channel, so you can listen to it yourself if you'd like. It opens up with the Trinity killer, so I'll just talk about it. So he kills young women with a switchblade razor to the thigh in the bathtub. The second murder is a mother of 2, and he would talk them into jumping off of the building. He wouldn't push them, he would just talk them into jumping off the building. And then the other one was a brawl gone wrong with fathers. So like a dad would get in a fight with someone and die. And then the fourth one, the Trinity killer would go on vacation to build homes for the homeless. And it was called 4 Walls, 1 Heart, which signifies the 4 kills, kind of interesting. And a dead boy was in all of the basements of those homes. So very sad. This is all fictional, so I feel like I can separate myself from it a little more. I don't feel like I could do true crime stuff, so this I'm like, it's all fake. I just tell myself that. So Frank Lundy was the one who put the pattern together. He and Deb dated, and Lundy was also a friend of Harry's, who is Deb's father, so he was an older guy, but they had a relationship. Arthur Mitchell was the name of the Trinity killer. He was the father of 2 and had a loving wife. So it ended up that Joey Quinn and Arthur's daughter dated, which is funny because Joey Quinn ends up getting engaged to Deb later. Podcaster Girl says, it's funny how serial killers and their families can sometimes Venn diagram with law enforcement, which is interesting. You're kind of like, does she know about Dexter? Does she know? Does she know? So it ends up that the Trinity killer's daughter, Arthur's daughter, ends up killing Lundy and shoots Deb as well. And then the daughter killed herself. Then she says that the Trinity killer, the other connection is that the Trinity killer killed Rita, who was Deb's sister-in-law. Does she know who Dexter is then? Like, it only takes 1 dot to connect that, you know what I mean? Like, it goes from, you know, Deb to sister-in-law. Wouldn't it be like, who is her brother? She also mentions during the podcast that she has an episode on the Bay Harbor Butcher, who is Dexter, obviously, but Dokes was framed. During the show, she said that she thinks that killer is still out there. But at the end of the podcast, she says that the next episode will be the ice truck killer. She has episodes on the Bay Harbor Butcher, the ice truck killer, and the Trinity killer, all involving Dexter. So you're like, does she know? Some say maybe not, because she wouldn't have gotten into the car with him, but that was also like her only chance. And it's possible that she might like Dexter. She might be a fan of him because a lot of people see him as a vigilante because he kills serial killers. If she does know the identity, maybe she's cool with it. Maybe she's just like, I like Dexter, whatever. I loved that they did a little episode on this. I'll link it down below so you guys can listen to it if you want to. I hope they do one on the Bay Harbor Butcher and the ice truck killer, at least like post it to their YouTube channel in the future, because I would love to hear those. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been a blast. I had so much fun making this, and I will see you guys in part 2. Bye.